What if everything you believed about duty, loyalty, and justice could crumble in a single moment? What if the very institution you've sworn to protect becomes the enemy you must fight against? On a cold December morning in 2019, Royal Protection Officer James Mitchell thought he was simply following orders. Escort the Duchess away from the scene. Keep her safe. Maintain the Crown's reputation. It was supposed to be routine, another day of shielding the royal family from scandal. But, when James discovered what was hidden in that locked briefcase Camilla clutched so desperately, when he realized the truth behind the accident that had claimed 3 lives, everything changed. The man who had dedicated 15 years to protecting the monarchy suddenly found himself holding evidence that could destroy it. This is the story of how one discovery turned a loyal guardian into the crown's most dangerous enemy, and how the truth, once unleashed, became impossible to contain. Some secrets are worth dying for. Others are worth living to expose. James Mitchell adjusted his earpiece as the black Range Rover pulled up to the Yorkshire estate. 15 years of royal protection duty had taught him to read situations before they developed. Today felt different. The Duchess had been unusually quiet during the 2-hour drive from London, clutching a leather briefcase like her life depended on it. The December wind cut through his tactical jacket as he stepped out first, scanning the sprawling grounds. Whitmore Estate stretched across 200 acres of rolling hills, its Georgian mansion standing like a monument to Old English wealth. This wasn't an official royal residence, which made James wonder why they were here at all. "All clear, ma'am," he spoke into his radio, opening the passenger door for Camilla. She emerged slowly, her usually perfect composure cracked around the edges. Her hands shook as she gripped the briefcase tighter. James had protected her for 3 years now, and he'd never seen her this rattled. "How long will we be staying, Your Royal Highness?" James asked, falling into step beside her as they approached the main entrance. "As long as necessary," she replied curtly, not meeting his eyes. The massive oak doors opened before they reached them. A thin, elderly man in an expensive suit appeared. Lord Harold Whitmore, the estate's owner. James recognized him from intelligence briefings. Old money, conservative connections, and rumored ties to several government ministers. "Your Royal Highness," Whitmore bowed slightly. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Is everything prepared?" Camilla asked, still clutching the briefcase. "The room is ready. Complete privacy, as requested. Mr. Mitchell, perhaps you'd like some refreshment while Her Royal Highness conducts her business?" James started to decline. Protocol demanded he stay close to his charge, but Camilla cut him off. "That's fine. I won't be long." Something in her tone made James's instincts flare. In 3 years, she'd never dismissed him during a meeting. He watched as she followed Whitmore down a corridor lined with oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. The housekeeper, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, appeared at his elbow. "Tea, sir?" "There's a lovely sitting room with a view of the gardens." James nodded, still watching the corridor where Camilla had disappeared. He followed the housekeeper to a sunlit room overlooking manicured lawns that stretched to a line of bare winter trees. As she prepared his tea, the housekeeper made small talk about the weather and the estate's history. James half listened, his attention focused on the muffled voices coming from somewhere deeper in the house. 20 minutes passed. Then, 30. "Excuse me," he said, standing. "I should check on Her Royal Highness." The housekeeper's cheerful demeanor faltered slightly. "Oh, I'm sure she's fine, sir. Lord Whitmore is taking excellent care of her." James's training kicked in. The woman's body language had shifted, tension in her shoulders, avoiding eye contact. Something was wrong. He walked back toward the corridor where he'd last seen Camilla, his footsteps muffled by thick carpet. The voices were clearer now, coming from behind a heavy wooden door at the end of the hall. "Can't be traced back to us," a man's voice was saying, not Whitmore. James moved closer, positioning himself where he could hear clearly but remain unseen. "The families are asking questions," Camilla's voice, strained with stress. "The investigation is supposed to be closed." "It is closed," another man replied, his accent American. "Officially. But we have a problem." One of the drivers survived longer than expected. He was conscious when the paramedics arrived. James's blood chilled. They were talking about the M25 accident from 3 weeks ago, the pileup that had killed 3 people, including a prominent journalist and a government whistleblower. The official report blamed it on fog and driver error. What did he say? Whitmore's voice now, tight with concern. Enough to worry us. He mentioned seeing a black sedan following his car before the accident. And he specifically mentioned the registration plate. The briefcase. James suddenly understood why Camilla had been gripping it so desperately. It contained evidence that would prove the accident wasn't an accident at all. The plate leads back to a rental company, the American continued. Which leads to a shell corporation. Which leads to certain government contracts. We're 3 degrees of separation from a scandal that could bring down the government. And implicate the crown, Camilla added quietly. James felt the world tilt beneath his feet. The royal family, his royal family, was involved in covering up murder. 3 innocent people were dead, and the institution he'd sworn to protect was helping hide the truth. The driver died this morning, Whitmore said. Natural complications from his injuries. Very unfortunate. Very convenient, James thought grimly. So the immediate threat is contained, the American said. But we still have the matter of the physical evidence. The plate numbers, the rental agreements, the communications. All of it's in here, Camilla said, and James heard the sound of a briefcase opening. Financial records, correspondence, the original investigation notes before they were sanitized. Excellent. Everything will be destroyed today. By tonight, this incident will be nothing more than a tragic accident, exactly as the public believes. James backed away from the door, his mind racing. He had minutes, maybe less, before the meeting ended and the evidence was destroyed forever. 3 families would never know the truth about their loved ones' deaths. A journalist who died trying to expose government corruption would be remembered as just another traffic statistic. He pulled out his phone, fingers moving quickly over the screen. His training included digital forensics, a skill the Royal Protection Detail had added to their repertoire in the age of cyber threats. If he could access the estate's security system, he might be able to record what was happening in that room. The estate's Wi-Fi network appeared on his phone unsecured, like many older properties. James connected quickly, then used a penetration app to probe for connected devices. There are multiple security cameras throughout the house, all feeding to a central system. His phone buzzed with an incoming message from his supervisor, status report. All quiet? James stared at the message. Protocol demanded he report any concerns immediately. But reporting this would mean alerting the very system that was covering up the murders. His supervisor answered to the royal household. The royal household answered to people who were in that room right now, deciding how to bury evidence of 3 deaths. He typed back, all quiet. Routine meeting proceeding normally. It was the first lie he'd told in 15 years of service. The security app had found the network. James navigated through the camera feeds until he found the right room. The video quality was poor, but he could make out 4 figures around a large table: Camilla, Whitmore, the American, and a 4th man he didn't recognize. James started recording on his phone, holding it steady as he captured the screen showing the briefcase contents spread across the table. Documents, photographs, what looked like financial statements. Even through the grainy security feed, he could see enough detail to know this was explosive evidence. Footsteps in the corridor. James quickly closed the app and pocketed his phone, turning to face the housekeeper approaching with fresh tea. Thought you might like a warm-up, sir, she said, but her eyes were suspicious now. Thank you, James replied, accepting the cup with steady hands. Inside, his heart was hammering. The housekeeper lingered, making it clear she was watching him. James sipped his tea and gazed out the window, projecting calm while his mind worked furiously. He had partial evidence now, but not enough. Not yet. The voices from the meeting room had stopped. James heard movement, then the sound of the door opening. He moved to the sitting room doorway, arriving just as Camilla emerged from the corridor. The briefcase was gone. "Ready to leave?" she asked, but her tone suggested it wasn't really a question. "Of course, Your Royal Highness." As they walked toward the entrance, James caught sight of smoke rising from somewhere behind the house. The evidence was already burning. During the drive back to London, Camilla stared out the window in silence. James watched her in the rearview mirror, this woman he'd protected and respected for 3 years. She looked older now, worn down by whatever weight she was carrying. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We know what you heard. Keep quiet, and your family stays safe." James's hands tightened on the steering wheel. They'd been watching him, probably had been since the moment he'd approached that door. The housekeeper, the security system, maybe even his own phone, they had eyes everywhere. But they'd made one mistake. They assumed he'd be intimidated into silence. James Mitchell had spent 15 years protecting people from threats. Now he realized that sometimes the greatest threat came from the very people you were supposed to trust. As London's skyline appeared ahead of them, James made a decision that would change everything. He wasn't going to keep quiet. He was going to expose the truth, no matter what it cost him. The war between duty and conscience had begun, and James knew there could be only one winner. The question was whether he'd live long enough to make sure it was the right one. James returned to his flat in Putney that evening with the weight of betrayal pressing against his chest. The familiar surroundings, his Medal of Valor displayed on the mantel, photographs from royal tours, commendations from 15 years of flawless service, now felt like artifacts from someone else's life. He double-locked his door and drew the curtains before pulling out his phone. The recording he'd captured at Whitmore Estate was grainy but audible. With proper enhancement software, it could be clear enough to identify voices and reveal the conspiracy. But who could he trust with it? His mind went to Detective Inspector Sarah Chen at Scotland Yard. They'd worked together on security details for royal visits to London. She was thorough, honest, and, crucially, she operated outside the royal protection structure. But even she would have to report up the chain of command, and James now understood how deeply the corruption reached. The threatening text message haunted him. They knew about his family, his sister Emma in Manchester, her 2 young children. His ex-wife Catherine in Surrey. Everyone he cared about was now a potential target. James opened his laptop and began researching the M25 accident victims. Marcus Holloway, 34, an investigative journalist who'd been working on a series about government defense contracts. Diana Petrov, 28, a civil servant in the Ministry of Defense who'd recently filed several whistleblower complaints. Robert Chen, 41, a parliamentary aide who'd been scheduled to testify before a select committee about defense spending irregularities. 3 people who'd been asking uncomfortable questions about the same government contracts. 3 people who'd died in what was officially a tragic accident caused by fog and poor visibility. James pulled up the official accident report online. It was thorough, professional, and completely fabricated. He'd seen enough real accident scenes to recognize the inconsistencies. The vehicle damage patterns didn't match the official explanation. The timeline had gaps. Most telling of all, the report made no mention of any surveillance footage from the motorway, despite the M25 being one of the most monitored roads in Britain. His phone rang. The caller ID showed his supervisor, Commander Bradley Walsh. "Mitchell, need you to come in early tomorrow. Schedule change for the Duchess." James kept his voice steady. "Of course, sir." "What time?" 6 a.m. "And, James, bring your full operational report from today's Yorkshire visit. Every detail." The line went dead. They were testing him, seeing if he'd mention what he'd witnessed. James stared at the phone, knowing his next words would determine whether he lived or died. He spent the next hour crafting a careful operational report that mentioned nothing unusual about the Whitmore Estate visit. Standard security assessment, routine meeting, no incidents to report. Each word felt like a betrayal of everything he'd sworn to uphold, but it bought him time. At 11 p.m., his doorbell rang. James checked the security monitor and saw a young woman in a courier uniform, holding an envelope. He didn't open the door. Just leave it there, he called through the intercom. Need a signature, sir. Official business. Leave it there or take it back. Your choice. The woman hesitated, then placed the envelope on his doorstep and left. James waited 20 minutes before retrieving it, using a pair of kitchen tongs to avoid fingerprints. Inside was a single photograph, his sister Emma picking up her children from school, taken that afternoon. On the back, someone had written, "Beautiful family. Be a shame if something happened to them." James felt rage surge through him, clean and clarifying. These people had murdered 3 innocents and were now threatening children. His sister's children. The photo was a line crossed, a declaration of war. He called Emma, keeping his voice casual. "Hi Em, just checking in. How are the kids?" "They're fine, James. Bit of a strange day, though. There was a man taking photographs outside the school. Said he was from the local paper, doing a story about road safety. Very friendly, very professional, but it seemed odd." "Did you get his name?" "Something Smith, I think. Probably nothing, but it made me nervous." James closed his eyes. They were already in position, already watching. "Em, I need you to listen carefully. Take the kids and go stay with Mum for a few days. Tonight." "James, what's going on?" "I can't explain right now, but please trust me. Pack bags for a week and drive to Manchester tonight. Don't tell anyone where you're going." There was a long pause. Emma had always been able to read him, even as children. "This is about your work, isn't it? You're in some kind of trouble. Just go, Em. Please. I'll call you when it's safe." After she hung up, James sat in his darkened flat, planning his next move. He couldn't go to the police, too many connections to the government. He couldn't trust his colleagues, they were part of the royal protection system. He needed someone completely outside the establishment, someone with the resources and motivation to expose the truth. The answer came to him at 3 a.m., investigative journalist Sarah Fleming from The Guardian. She'd built her reputation on exposing government corruption, and she had a particular interest in defense contract irregularities. More importantly, she'd worked with Marcus Holloway, one of the victims, on several previous stories. James spent the remaining hours before dawn preparing. He created multiple copies of his recordings and documentation, storing them in different locations. He wrote a detailed account of everything he'd witnessed, including names, dates, and locations. If something happened to him, the evidence would survive. At 5:30 a.m., James drove to New Scotland Yard, arriving early for his meeting with Commander Walsh. The building felt different now, not the symbol of justice and order he'd always seen, but a maze of potential enemies and uncertain loyalties. Commander Walsh was waiting in his office, along with 2 men James didn't recognize. Both had the subtle bearing of intelligence operatives, expensive suits, careful posture, eyes that missed nothing. "Mitchell, these gentlemen are from the security service. They have some questions about yesterday's operation." James sat down, maintaining the calm exterior that had served him through 15 years of high-stress situations. The first man, tall with prematurely gray hair, spoke with the precise diction of expensive education. "Officer Mitchell, we understand you accompanied Her Royal Highness to Yorkshire yesterday. Routine security detail?" "Yes, sir. Standard protection protocol for a private meeting." "And you remained with Her Royal Highness throughout the visit?" James met his eyes steadily. "I remained on site, yes sir. The Duchess had requested privacy for her meeting, so I maintained a security perimeter while she conducted her business." "You didn't overhear any of this business?" "No sir. I was positioned in a separate part of the house." The second man, shorter and stockier, leaned forward. "Officer Mitchell, I hope you understand the sensitivity of royal security. Any breach of confidentiality, any discussion of operational details outside proper channels, would be considered a serious offense." "I understand completely, sir." "Good. Because there are people who might try to exploit any information you might have inadvertently acquired. People who would use such information to harm the crown, to destabilize the government. You wouldn't want to be involved with such people, would you? The threat was clear. James nodded. Of course not, sir. Excellent. Commander Walsh will be adjusting your duties for the next few weeks. Light rotation, nothing too demanding. We want you to take some time, perhaps visit family, relax after yesterday's demanding assignment. They were removing him from active duty, isolating him from information and access. James realized this was likely his last day inside Scotland Yard. Thank you, sir. That's very considerate. After the intelligence operatives left, Commander Walsh closed his office door. James, I've known you for 8 years. You're one of the most reliable officers I've ever worked with. So I'm going to ask you straight, is there anything about yesterday that I should know? James looked at this man who'd been his mentor, his advocate for promotion, his friend. Walsh had always been honest with him. But, even honest men could be part of corrupt systems. Nothing to report, sir. Routine operation, no incidents. Walsh studied his face for a long moment. All right. Take the time they're offering. Go see your sister, take a holiday. Let things settle down. As James left the building, he realized Walsh's words had been carefully chosen. Let things settle down was a warning, not advice. His supervisor knew something was wrong but couldn't act on it within the system. Outside, London pulsed with its normal rhythm, tourists heading to Buckingham Palace, civil servants walking to their offices, the machinery of government grinding forward as it had for centuries. None of them knew that 3 people had been murdered to protect that machinery, that the crown they revered was built on the bodies of those who'd asked inconvenient questions. James walked to a secure internet cafe in Shoreditch, paying cash and using false identification he'd acquired through contacts developed over years of protection work. He logged into an anonymous email account and composed a message to Sarah Fleming at The Guardian. I have information about the M25 accident. Marcus Holloway was investigating something that got him killed. The other victims were connected. I have evidence of a cover-up that reaches the highest levels of government. If you're interested in finishing Marcus's work, meet me at the Churchill War Rooms tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone, and watch for surveillance. He signed it simply, a friend of justice. As James sent the message, he knew there was no turning back. By tomorrow, he'd either be dead or wanted for treason. But 3 families deserved the truth about their loved ones, and sometimes the truth was worth more than safety. Walking back into the London morning, James Mitchell was no longer a royal protection officer. He was a man at war with the system he'd once served, carrying evidence that could topple governments and destroy lives. The only question now was whether he'd survive long enough to use it. Sarah Fleming arrived at the Churchill War Rooms 15 minutes early, her journalist's instincts on high alert. The anonymous email had used Marcus Holloway's name, her former colleague and friend who'd died in that suspicious M25 accident 3 weeks ago. Marcus had been working on something big before his death, something about defense contracts and government corruption. Now someone claiming to have evidence was reaching out. She positioned herself near the entrance to the underground museum, watching faces, looking for surveillance. At exactly 2 p.m., she spotted him, tall, athletic build, the careful posture of military or police training. He approached slowly, eyes scanning the crowd with professional paranoia. Miss Fleming? James kept his voice low. Thank you for coming. You knew Marcus? Sarah studied his face, looking for deception. I knew of his work. What happened to him wasn't an accident. They walked deeper into the museum, past displays of wartime strategy rooms and communication equipment. The irony wasn't lost on James, meeting in a place dedicated to Britain's fight against fascism while discussing modern threats to democracy. Who are you? Sarah asked as they stopped near a display about code breaking. Someone who saw too much. Someone who can't stay quiet anymore. James handed her a burner phone. Everything I'm about to tell you is on that device. Audio recordings, photographs, documents. Proof of a conspiracy that goes to the very top. Sarah pocketed the phone without looking at it. Start talking. James told her everything. The meeting at Whitmore Estate, the briefcase full of evidence, the conversation about covering up the M25 murders. He described the threats against his family, his forced removal from duty, the intelligence operatives who'd made it clear his silence was expected. The journalist who died, Marcus, he was investigating Sentinel Defense Solutions, James continued. Government contracts worth hundreds of millions, all awarded without proper bidding processes. Diana Petrov from the Ministry of Defense had evidence of the corruption. Robert Chen was going to testify about it to Parliament. And, you think they were killed to silence them? I know they were. The accident was staged. The investigation was fixed. Evidence was destroyed at Whitmore Estate yesterday while I watched. Sarah's mind was racing. She'd been investigating defense contract irregularities for months, following leads Marcus had developed before his death. This filled in gaps she'd been unable to bridge. The royal connection? The Duchess was there. She had the evidence, financial records, correspondence, the real accident investigation before it was sanitized. She was helping them destroy it. That's... Sarah paused, considering the implications. That's explosive. If true, it could bring down the government. It's true. And, they'll kill to keep it secret. They've already threatened my family. Sarah studied him carefully. 15 years of journalism had taught her to read people, to distinguish between truth and fabrication. Everything about James Mitchell suggested a man telling the truth at enormous personal cost. What do you want from me? Publish it. All of it. Make sure the families know their loved ones died because they were trying to expose corruption, not because of fog and bad driving. I'll need to verify everything. Cross-reference sources, confirm details. You don't have time for traditional verification. They're already moving to silence me. By tomorrow, I could be dead or disappeared. As if summoned by his words, James's phone buzzed with a text message, your sister and her children are safe. For now. Don't make us change that. James showed Sarah the message. They have my family under surveillance. Probably yours too, now that you're involved. Sarah's blood chilled. She thought of her teenage daughter in Brighton, her elderly parents in Scotland. By taking this meeting, she'd put them all at risk. There's something else, James continued. Marcus wasn't just investigating Sentinel defense. He'd uncovered evidence that several other accidents were actually assassinations. A car crash in Wales that killed an environmental activist. A climbing accident in Scotland that killed a local councillor investigating land deals. A drug overdose in Manchester that killed a social worker who'd been reporting on government placement contracts. How many people? At least 8 in the past 2 years. All of them were investigating or about to expose different aspects of the same corruption network. Sarah felt sick. If this was true, they weren't dealing with a simple cover-up but a systematic campaign of murder to protect government corruption. I need to see the evidence now, she said. They found a quiet corner of the museum, and Sarah powered on the burner phone. The recordings were clear enough to identify voices, the documents damning in their detail. She recognized several names from her own investigations, government ministers, defense contractors, senior civil servants. This is a smoking gun, she whispered. But, publishing it will make us targets. We're already targets. The only question is whether we die having accomplished something worthwhile. Sarah made her decision. I need 6 hours to prepare the story and get it to press. Can you stay hidden that long? I'll try. But, Sarah, don't go home tonight. Don't follow any routine. They'll be watching. They separated, agreeing to communicate only through the burner phones. Sarah headed directly to the Guardian offices, her mind already structuring the story that would expose the conspiracy. James walked to Victoria Station, taking a circuitous route through London's crowded streets. He'd spotted at least 2 surveillance teams following him from the museum, professional but
not invisible to someone with his training. At Victoria, he bought a ticket to Brighton using cash and false identification. Not because he planned to go to Brighton, but to create a false trail. He waited until the last possible moment, then slipped out of the station through a service entrance he'd mapped during previous security assessments. The real destination was a safe house in Bermondsey, a flat rented under an assumed name, stocked with supplies, off the grid. James had prepared it months ago as an emergency location, though he'd never imagined needing it to hide from his own government. Inside the nondescript council flat, James turned on the television to monitor news broadcasts. Nothing yet about the conspiracy, but that was expected. Sarah would need time to write, editors would need time to review, lawyers would need time to assess legal risks. His burner phone rang at 6 p.m. "It's Fleming. I've got problems." "What kind of problems?" "My editor received a D notice 2 hours ago. Government order prohibiting publication on grounds of national security. They know we have the story." James closed his eyes. D notices were rarely used, but when they were absolute. No newspaper in Britain would publish anything covered by one. Options? International publication. "I have contacts at the Washington Post, the New York Times."
"They're not bound by British law." "Do it. Fast." "Already working on it." "But, James, they raided my flat an hour ago." "Official terrorism investigation," they said. "Looking for evidence of threats against national security." "Are you safe?" "For now. I'm not at the office, and I'm moving every 30 minutes. But they're closing in." At 8 p.m., James's regular phone rang. "Commander Walsh." "James, you need to turn yourself in. There's a warrant out for your arrest." "Terrorism charges." "For telling the truth?" "For stealing classified documents and conspiring with foreign agents." "They're painting you as a traitor, James. Come in now, and maybe we can work something out. You know that's not what this is about." There was a long pause. "I know. But I can't help you if you don't surrender." "I'm sorry, sir. But some things are worth more than personal safety." James hung up and powered off the phone. Within minutes, his burner phone rang. "Fleming here. It's done. Washington Post is publishing online in 20 minutes. Full story, all evidence. International wire services are picking it up. Good. Get somewhere safe." "Too late. They're here." The line went dead. James turned on every news channel, watching for breaking news alerts. At 9:47 p.m., it happened. BBC News interrupted regular programming with a special report. This is a BBC News special report. An international investigation has revealed evidence of a conspiracy involving the highest levels of the British government in the assassination of multiple civilians to cover up corruption in defense contracts. The anchor's voice was steady, but James could see the strain in her eyes as she continued. The investigation, published by the Washington Post and confirmed by sources within British intelligence, alleges that at least 8 people have been murdered over the past 2 years to prevent exposure of fraudulent government contracts worth hundreds of millions of pounds. James watched as his story exploded across global media. Within an hour, it was the lead story on every major news network worldwide. Social media erupted with demands for investigations, arrests, resignations. By midnight, the first government minister had resigned. By 2 a.m., protesters were gathering outside Downing Street. By dawn, 3 senior civil servants had been arrested. But James knew the real test was still coming. The people behind this conspiracy wouldn't give up easily. They'd try to discredit the story, silence witnesses, claim national security exemptions. His burner phone buzzed with a text message, "Your family is safe." "Thank you." The number was Sarah's. She'd survived whatever had happened when they tracked her down. James spent the next 3 days in the safe house, watching his story tear through the British establishment. The Prime Minister held emergency sessions with Cabinet. The opposition demanded a full parliamentary inquiry. International allies questioned Britain's commitment to transparency and rule of law. On the fourth day, a new text arrived: Royal Protection Detail disbanded. Full investigation ordered. You're cleared of all charges. Official apology forthcoming. Time to come home.
But home felt different now. James had seen behind the curtain, understood how easily institutions could be corrupted, how quickly honor could become complicity. 2 weeks later, he stood in the same flat where his journey had begun, watching news reports about the trials beginning for those involved in the conspiracy. 7 government officials arrested.
12 civil servants under investigation. Sentinel Defense Solutions dissolved, its assets frozen. The families of the M25 victims had been told the truth. Marcus Holloway's editor was planning a posthumous collection of his investigative work. Diana Petrov was being honored as a whistleblower hero.
Robert Chen's widow was finally able to grieve her husband as a man who died fighting corruption, not as a traffic accident victim.
James's phone rang. Sarah Fleming.
Thought you'd want to know, I just got word that Camilla is being questioned by investigators. Apparently, she's decided to cooperate fully. Seems your recording convinced her that loyalty to the crown means protecting it from corruption, not hiding it. And the others? Whitmore, the Americans? Whitmore's under arrest. The Americans are fighting extradition, but they'll face justice eventually.
James looked out his window at London stretching toward the horizon.
Somewhere out there, 3 families were finally getting answers about their loved ones' deaths. Somewhere else, government officials were learning that power didn't make them untouchable. You know, Sarah continued, I'm working on a book about all this. Would love to interview you properly.
Maybe, James said. When I'm ready to tell the whole story. What are you going to do now? James had been thinking about that question for days.
His career in royal protection was over, but perhaps that was for the best. Truth-telling, he'd discovered, was its own form of service. I think, he said slowly, I'm going to start an organization for government whistleblowers. People who see corruption and need help exposing it safely. People who shouldn't have to choose between their family's safety and their duty to the truth.
Sounds like important work. The most important work there is.
After Sarah hung up, James sat in the growing darkness, thinking about duty and honor and the price of silence. He'd lost his career but saved his conscience. He'd risked everything but gained something more valuable than safety, the knowledge that when faced with the ultimate test, he'd chosen truth over comfort, justice over security. Outside his window, London pulsed with life, millions of people going about their daily business, trusting that their government served them honestly, believing that justice would prevail over corruption.
James Mitchell had helped ensure that trust wasn't misplaced.
It was, he reflected, the most important service he'd ever performed for his country. The royal guard who'd once protected secrets now protected something far more precious, the truth itself.